All right, the basis of this lesson is the zero product property. And it says this, that if you multiply two things together, let's say you multiply A times B, and it equals zero, then either A was equal to zero or B was equal to zero. Try it for yourself. The only way that you multiply two values and get zero is if at least one of them is zero. So if we said this value, x plus 3, that's just a single number. If we had a number for x, that would be a number, times that same number plus 2 gives you another number. If that number times that number equaled 0, then what would you know? You would know that either this x plus 3 had to result in 0. There's a value for x that would make that 0, and therefore that times that would equal 0. Or it was that was 0, and this times that 0 equals 0. Okay, so either x plus 3 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. And in fact, there's going to be two different values, one for this when you solve it and one for this, both of which will, when plugged in here, will result in 0 as a product. Here's the idea as an example. Okay, if you took 4t plus 1 times t minus 2 and got 0, then what are the solutions? What are the values of t in this case that would turn that to 0? So take each binomial, set it equal to 0, and solve it. Okay, and you should, if you were given this, pretty sure that if you weren't getting stuck thinking it was way more complicated and you just said, oh, he's just having me solve a basic equation, you could do it. T equals negative 1/4, or if you solve this, you'd find t equals 2. These two numbers for t, when plugged in, will produce out 0. Okay? Here's your got it problem. You're going to try it with each one of these. Take these, and remember, this right here, if you multiplied it together, you'd get a quadratic function. Okay? X squared minus 4x minus 5. If that was equal to 0, what values of x would turn it to 0? Set this equal to 0 to find out. Set this equal to 0 and find out the values of x. Do that for all of them. So as this says, you can also use the zero product property to solve equations if you have them in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c, and you set it equal to 0. Okay? Because what you're doing is just saying if the whole thing equals 0, there's going to be values of x that will produce 0. Okay? And that's if this can be factored. Everything that we've given you so far can be factored. Some things cannot be. Some things result in values that just don't work. Okay, and we'll get to that next lesson. But right now, solve by factoring. Okay, problem 2. What are the solutions of this? Well, you're going to need to factor that. Okay, they give us these multiple choice answers, and really, it's the kind of idea is like, well, how do you factor it? You should already have a process for factoring. I'm assuming that you understand how to find that. I've given you a step-by-step way of doing it, but anyway, you're going to find two, since this is just x squared, you can just find two numbers that multiply together to be 15. That's positive, and this is positive, meaning that signs are the same. They're both positive. Okay, so they've got to add together, multiply to 15, add to 8. So if you were to continue and say, okay, I know how to factor this, you would get these two factored binomials, and setting each one equal to 0, you'd find these two values of x would produce 0 either here, if it was this, or here, if it was this value of x. And so therefore, the answer A, negative 5 and negative 3 are the two values of x that would turn it to 0. Yep. Okay, you're going to factor these, and then set each binomial equal to 0, solve for the value of the variable that makes that particular binomial equal to 0, and the two different values are your solutions. Now, as the name of this problem suggests, you might sometimes need to first write the equation in the standard form. Okay, so what are the solutions of 4x squared minus 21x plus 18? And the first thing that it says to do is to subtract 18 from both sides. Now, why do we need to subtract 18 from both sides? Because the zero product property states that the whole thing is equal to 0. So you need to turn it into an equation that equals 0. This right now doesn't. Okay, subtracting 18 from both sides, you say, okay, now if the whole thing equals 0, then we have the proper equation, the proper trinomial here to factor, to find the two binomials that we can each set equal to 0, and find the zeros of this particular function. So when you solve this out, factoring this, and I gave you a step-by-step guide for how to factor trinomials, particularly with an a value greater than 1. That's what makes it trickiest, okay? But you have that step-by-step guide, and you should apply it here, and it will turn into this. Now take that binomial, set it equal to 0, and solve for x. Take that binomial, set it equal to 0, and solve for x. Those two x values are the solutions. The places, the values of x that will turn this function to 0, and therefore these are the x coordinates of 2 points, each producing a y coordinate of 0. And when you have a point with a y coordinate of 0, it's on the x-axis. So these two locations on the x-axis will be the place where the parabola crosses the x-axis. Yep. So try this. What are the solutions of this? You'll need to, as this problem says, write it in standard form first. And then, why do quadratics of this form or this form have only one real number solution? This might be a stretch for you to connect, but if you can, it's really wonderful that you can. And that's actually going on here. So you'll see that when you try and solve this, okay? See if you can get what's going on here. Factor, rewrite this, and then factor it out and solve for those zeros. And then analyze what you got there, and it'll help you with this. So finally, we're applying this to a real-life problem. You're constructing a frame for the rectangular photo shown over here. It is an 11 by 17. And you want the frame to be the same width all the way around, and the total area to be 315 inches squared. What should the outer dimensions of the frame be? How can we find the exact measure of this that will result in 315 square inches total, okay? And if you look at if you think about a rectangle, the rectangle is the length. In this case, it's going to be 11 plus that x, which of course then would be 2x plus 11 and times the width. And so it'll be that x plus the 17, or 2x plus 17. So that's what you've kind of got, and it's got to equal 315, right? Here they're saying, well, what do you know? You know that the size of the photo is 11 by 17. The total area must be 315 inches squared, and the outer dimensions of the frame are what you need. So you write the frame's outer dimensions in terms of its width x, like I said, okay? 11 plus 2x and 17 plus 2x. Use these dimensions to write an equation. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like this here. And actually, I'll move this down a step at a time. You know that one direction it's 2x plus 11, the other direction it's 2x plus 17, and it equals 315. Can you set these equal to 0? No, you may not. Why not? Because it doesn't equal 0 yet. Okay, you have to subtract 315 from both sides, which is going to change what this resulting left side would factor into. Watch. Okay, you multiply it all together, you get that. Now you've got to subtract 315 from each side. Now you have something that can be factored. Okay, and in fact, you can see that these are all multiples of 4. So you're going to factor out the 4 first, and then you're left with the resulting trinomial to factor. Okay, when you factor that, you get x plus 16 and x minus 2. And you get then the two binomials set equal to 0. How do we ignore the 4? Well, note that if the things that multiply together make a 0 eventually, and so we're saying, okay, what could the values of x be? Well, that's one of the things that multiplies together. So you don't set 4 equal to 0. 4 does not equal 0. Okay, so this isn't going to be the thing that's going to turn it all to 0. It's either going to be that or that. It's the only things that could possibly be set equal to 0 logically and solve. So you do it. Okay, and when you do that, you get x equals negative 16 or x equals 2. It doesn't make any sense for the value of x to be negative 16, okay, because that would be 11 minus 2 groups of 16 is going to give you a negative number. There's no such thing as negative lengths. So the only reasonable solution is the positive length for the frame width, which is 2. So the outer dimensions are 2 times 2, 2 inches for each side of the frame, 4 plus 11, or 15, times 2 times 2 inches for each side of the frame, plus the 17, or 21. And if you multiply those together, you will see that they indeed equal 315 inches squared. Okay, so you're going to try that. You're going to apply that, look at that problem, and say, suppose it was now, instead of 315, it was 391. Put 391 in there, okay? Do the exact same thing. You'll get to this stage here. It'll still multiply to that, but it'll equal 391. Subtract 391 from both sides, so you have 0 on one side, and then factor the remainder and see what values of x once you've set those factors to 0. All right, you know what to do. Try these lesson check problems. If you're not doing them, then you're not really fully checking whether you know how it's going. Anyway, restart when you have your answers and see how you did. Good luck.